The night my uncle said I was overreacting. The bruise on my ribs from my stepmother's rings was still fading. I was 26. Yet they treated me like a stain on the family honor. I thought their cruelty over dessert in my own penthouse was the worst part, but I was wrong. The real nightmare arrived 10 seconds later when the doorbell rang, and the truth walked in wearing a police badge. My name is Kiara Schwartz, and I am 26 years old, standing precisely 6 inches from a pane of glass that costs more than my father's entire plumbing business. Below me, Chicago is freezing over, the city turning into a grid of amber streetlights and icy wind. From this height, looking down at Millennium Park, the ice skaters are nothing but microscopic specks of light carving loops into the dark, oblivious to the fact that someone is watching them from the 45th floor. The silence up here is absolute. It is the kind of silence that money buys, thick, pressurized, and completely insulated from the chaos of the streets below. I press my forehead against the cold surface. My breath fogs the glass for a second before fading. A ghost of warmth in a room that feels like a mausoleum of success. I am alone. I am usually alone up here, and I have convinced myself that I like it that way. It is safer, the air is filtered, the security is tight, and the only person who can hurt me here is me. Then, the vibration cuts through the quiet. My phone is sitting on the kitchen island, a slab of Italian marble that looks like a frozen river. The screen lights up, casting a harsh blue glow against the gray stone. It buzzes once, a short, angry sound that echoes in the emptiness. I do not need to look to know who it is. My body knows before my brain does. My shoulders tense up, climbing toward my ears, a conditioned reflex honed over 12 years of living in a house where footsteps outside my door meant I needed to pretend I did not exist. I walk over to the island, my bare feet making no sound on the heated floor. The notification is from the Pierce family group chat. I pick it up. The message is from Dad. New Year's is going to be simple this year. Just Vanessa and Dylan at home. We will catch up with you sometime after the holidays. I stare at the words. I read them once, then twice. I analyze them the way I analyze code, looking for the bug, the error, the missing syntax. But the logic is flawless. Simple. That is the key word. Simple means without me. Simple means without the daughter who reminds his wife that he had a life before she walked in with her expensive perfume and her passive-aggressive sighs. Simple means they do not have to pretend to like me while passing the mashed potatoes. My name is nowhere in the text. I am not even an afterthought. I am an exclusion. My thumb hovers over the keyboard. I could type 1,000 things. I could type, I am your daughter. I could type, I spent Christmas alone last year, too. I could type, why does Dylan get to be there when he stole money from your wallet last month? But I don't. I type the word that has become my armor, my shield, and my prison. Okay. I hit send. Okay. I hate that word. I hate the shape of it in my mouth. I hate how round and harmless it looks on the screen. Okay is what I said when Vanessa turned my childhood bedroom into a meditation space for herself because she needed to align her chakras. Okay is what I said when Dad missed my high school graduation because Dylan had a minor stomachache that Vanessa insisted was appendicitis. Okay is the sound of me making myself smaller, so there is more room for them to be big. I put the phone face down on the marble. I cannot look at it anymore. I turn my back on the window, facing the room. My apartment, my home, stretches out before me. It is a masterpiece of modern architecture. 3,000 square feet of open-concept living space suspended above the loop. The furniture is low and sleek, upholstered in charcoal wool and cognac leather. There is a fireplace that runs on bioethanol, flickering silently in the wall. The kitchen is equipped with appliances that professional chefs would kill for, though I mostly use them to make toast. It is beautiful, it is impressive, and it is a secret. To my family, I am Kiara the disappointment. Kiara the struggling IT worker who lives in a cramped studio apartment in a bad neighborhood, probably eating instant noodles and counting pennies to pay the electric bill. They think I work help desk support. They think I fix printers for people who do not know how to unplug them. They think my absence from their lives is a mercy because I probably cannot afford the train ticket home anyway. They have no idea. They do not know that 3 years ago, I sat in a boardroom 40 floors below this one, wearing a suit I bought at a thrift store, and stared down a table of executives from the Northbridge Transit Group. They do not know that the little computer project I tinkered with in the garage to escape Vanessa's voice was actually a revolutionary piece of logistics optimization software. They do not know that I wrote an algorithm that could predict supply chain bottlenecks with 98% accuracy. I remember the moment I signed the papers. The pen felt heavy in my hand. The lawyer pushed the document toward me, his eyes wide, probably wondering if I even understood what I was reading. I understood every word. I understood the non-disclosure agreement that would keep my name out of the press, and I certainly understood the number at the bottom of the page. 8 figures. Not 6, not 7, 8. When the wire transfer hit my account 48 hours later, I sat in a laundromat, watching my sheets spin in the dryer, and cried. I did not cry because I was happy. I cried because I realized I could buy the house Vanessa kicked me out of 5 times over, and it still wouldn't make her love me. It still wouldn't make my dad look at me the way he looked at Dylan. So I kept it. I kept the money, and I kept the secret. I bought this penthouse through a shell company with a boring name that no one would ever Google. I moved in under the cover of darkness. I built a life here, in the sky, a fortress of solitude where I could be safe. I look around the living room now. It is ironic, really. The television stations down on State Street would pay $50,000 just to rent this balcony for their New Year's Eve countdown broadcast. The view is that iconic. The location is that prime. I own the view that people print on postcards. And yet, to the people who share my DNA, I am just the girl who is supposed to watch the house while the real family goes on vacation. I am the girl who gets the text message saying stay away, disguised as we are keeping it simple. I feel the anger rising in my throat, hot and acidic. It is usually a cold thing. My anger, it sits in my stomach like a stone, but tonight, it feels different. Tonight, it feels like fire. Maybe it is the time of year. Maybe it is the fact that I am 26, and I am still waiting for permission to be part of my own family. Maybe it is just that I am tired. I am so tired of being okay. I walk over to the sofa and sit down, not sinking in, but perching on the edge. I open my laptop. The screen comes to life, a stark white page staring back at me. Usually, on New Year's Eve, I order takeout from a Thai place down the street, drink half a bottle of expensive wine, and go to sleep before midnight. I hide. I hide up here in my glass tower and pretend that I do not care that the rest of the world is holding hands and counting down. But not this year. I look at the cursor blinking on the screen. Blink, blink, blink. It looks like a heartbeat. If they want simple, I will give them complex. If they want to exclude me, I will create something so inclusive, so warm, so undeniably real that their exclusion becomes irrelevant. I start typing, not a journal entry, not a letter I will never send. I am typing a guest list. I type the first name, Maya. Maya, my cousin in Denver, the one who called me crying last Thanksgiving because Vanessa made a comment about her weight in front of the whole table, and no one said a word. Maya, who works 2 jobs to support her kids and hasn't had a vacation in 4 years. Maya, who stopped coming to family events because she couldn't afford the mandatory gifts Vanessa expected. I type the second name, Aunt Lila. My dad's older sister, the one who lives in Phoenix, the one Vanessa calls tacky because she wears bright colors and laughs too loud. Lila, who used to sneak me candy when I was grounded for forgetting to wash Dylan's dishes. Lila, who hasn't been invited to a Pierce family Christmas in a decade because she refuses to kiss Vanessa's ring. I type Jonah, my cousin in Detroit, the musician, the failure of the family, according to Uncle Mark, Jonah, who sent me a handwritten letter when I went to college, telling me he was proud of me when my own father couldn't be bothered to say it. I keep typing. I add friends from college, the ones who stayed on campus during winter break because they had nowhere else to go, the scholarship kids. The ones who know what it is like to work a double shift at a coffee shop just to buy textbooks. This is not a list of VIPs. These aren't the people who run Chicago. These are the people who have been told, in one way or another, that they are not enough. These are the people who have heard the whispers. They don't treat you right. You deserve better. Why do you let them talk to you like that? I look at the list. There are 12 names. 12 people who are probably planning to spend New Year's Eve alone, or worse, feeling like an intrusion in someone else's joy. I am going to bring them here. I am going to fly them in. First class. I will send cars to pick them up. I will fill this empty, beautiful, cold mausoleum with the smell of roasting food and the sound of jazz and the warmth of bodies that actually want to be in the same room. I stand up and walk back to the window. The reflection in the glass shows a woman I barely recognize. Her jaw is set. Her eyes are dark. She doesn't look like the girl who types okay. She looks like the woman who negotiated a multi-million-dollar contract with a room full of sharks and didn't blink. This isn't just a party. This is a line in the sand. For years, I have let them dictate the terms of my existence. I let Vanessa decide when I could speak. I let Dad decide when I was worthy of attention. I let them draw the boundaries of my world. No more. I place my hand on the cold glass, my palm flat against the city lights. There is one rule for this night, one non-negotiable condition for entry into my sanctuary. No one who has ever looked me in the eye and said, "You are just overreacting about Vanessa," will ever step foot on this balcony. Not Uncle Mark, not the neighbors who turned a blind eye, and certainly not my father. They can have their simple New Year. They can sit in that house in Ohio with their secrets and their silence. But up here, we are going to make noise. I look at the list on my laptop one last time. I pick up my phone again. I am not texting Dad back. I am opening my travel app. I am booking flights. This year, no one on my list is going to watch the fireworks on a screen. They are not going to scroll through Instagram and wonder why they weren't invited. They are going to feel the cold wind of Lake Michigan on their faces. They are going to hold a glass of vintage champagne that costs more than Vanessa's car. They are going to look down at the world that tried to make them feel small. And they are going to realize just how high they can climb. I whisper it to the empty room, a vow that vibrates in the silence. Not this year. I turn away from the window, and for the first time in a long time, the penthouse doesn't feel empty. It feels like a stage, waiting for the curtain to rise. The okay girl is gone. The CEO is here, and she has a party to plan. To understand why I stood alone in a multi-million-dollar penthouse with a heart that felt like it had been encased in liquid nitrogen, you have to go back to the beginning. You have to go back to Toledo, Ohio, the winter I turned 14. That was the year the cold got into the house and never really left. It was the winter my father married Vanessa. Vanessa entered our lives like a weather system, a front of high pressure that pushed all the existing air out of the room. She was beautiful in a way that required maintenance, always smelling of expensive floral perfume and aggressive correction. When she moved in, the house stopped smelling like Dad's sawdust and my fabric softener. It started smelling like her. It smelled like lavender air fresheners and the distinct, sharp scent of judgment. She brought Dylan with her. Dylan was her son from a previous marriage, a soft, round-faced boy 2 years younger than me, who had clearly never been told no in his life. From the very first week, the hierarchy was established with the subtlety of a sledgehammer wrapped in velvet. I remember a Tuesday night shortly after the wedding. We were finishing dinner. Dylan had drawn a picture of a car during his free period at school. It was a scribbled, uneven thing, the wheels looking more like crushed eggs than tires. Vanessa held it up to the kitchen light as if it were a lost Da Vinci sketch. "Look at the perspective. Robert," she said to my father, her voice trembling with manufactured awe. "Look at how he captured the motion. He is so artistic. You are so gifted. Dylan." Dad nodded, chewing his pot roast, smiling that vague, tired smile of a man who just wanted peace. "It is great, buddy," he said. Then Vanessa turned her gaze to me. The warmth evaporated from her eyes, replaced by a dull, expectant flatness. Kiara, be a sweetie and clear the table, she said, and make sure you scrub the roasting pan properly this time. There was grease left on it last week. We are a family now, and everyone has to pitch in. Pitching in, I soon learned, was a synonym for Kiara working while everyone else bonded. While I stood at the sink, my hands red and stinging in the hot, soapy water, scraping burnt gravy off the metal, I could hear them in the living room. Vanessa was reading a magazine. Dad was watching the news. Dylan was playing a video game on the television. The volume turned up loud. They were a tableau of domestic relaxation. I was the hired help, paid in room and board and criticism. The holidays were where the disparity stopped being a feeling and became a physical object I could hold in my hands. Christmas morning that first year set the template for the next decade. The tree was buried under a mountain of shiny paper. I sat on the carpet, clutching my knees, watching Dylan tear through box after box. He got a new gaming console. He got a brand new snowboard. He got a leather jacket that cost more than our monthly grocery bill, with every rip of the paper. Vanessa clapped her hands and squealed. "You deserve it, baby," she cooled. "You have had such a hard year adjusting." Then it was my turn. There were 3 small packages for me. The first was a sweater. It was beige. It was scratchy acrylic. It was 2 sizes too big. The second was a set of textbooks for the next school year, books I would have gotten from the school library for free anyway. The third was a kit for shoe polishing. I looked up, confusion warring with the hurt in my chest. Vanessa smiled, a tight, closed-lipped expression. "Well, you are such a practical girl. Kiara, I told your father that you do not need all those silly gadgets and toys. You prefer things you can actually use, right? You are so mature for your age." She did not wait for an answer. She turned back to Dylan, who was already ignoring his gifts to complain that the snowboard was the wrong shade of blue. That was the trap. If I complained, I was ungrateful. If I accepted it, I agreed with her assessment that I was boring, practical, and undeserving of joy. So I smiled. I said thank you. And I learned that in this new economy, my happiness had 0 market value. Uncle Mark became the enforcer of this new regime. He was Dad's younger brother, a loud man who thought he knew everything about women because he had been divorced twice. He came over for Sunday dinners, and he worshipped Vanessa. He saw her as a saint who had taken pity on his widower brother. Whenever I tried to voice a frustration, like the time Vanessa threw away my art supplies because they were cluttering the space, Uncle Mark was there to shut it down. I would be crying, hot, angry tears running down my face, and Uncle Mark would lean back in his chair, picking his teeth. "Teenage girls," he would say to Dad, rolling his eyes. "They are all hormones and drama. Ignore it, Robert. She is just moody. You know how they get at this age." He looked at me with a sneer. "Your stepmother cleans this house and cooks for you. You should be kissing the ground she walks on, not whining about some cheap paintbrushes. Grow up, Kiara." He made my emotions feel like a disease. He made my valid anger look like hysteria. And Dad, weak, conflict-avoidant Dad, just nodded along. "He is right, Kiara." Dad would say, "Don't be difficult." But the violence wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet. It was the gaslighting that made me question my own sanity. I remember a Saturday in July. The sun was blazing. I was upstairs in my room, reading with the door closed because the noise of Dylan's video games was giving me a headache. I came downstairs at 1 in the afternoon to get a glass of water, and the house was silent. The car was gone. I waited. I waited for an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours. They came back at 6 in the evening, flushed and laughing, carrying bags from the outlet mall and smelling of popcorn. They had gone to the movies and then out for an early dinner. I stood in the hallway, feeling small and stupid. "You guys left," I said. My voice sounded thin. Vanessa put a hand to her chest, her eyes widening in a performance of shock that deserved an award. "Oh, Kiara, we thought you were busy studying. You know how you get when you have your nose in a book. We knocked. I swear we did. You must not have heard us." I stared at her. My door was thin. I heard every creak of the floorboards. No one had knocked. I did not hear you. I said, "Well, you always say you like the peace and quiet," Vanessa said, brushing past me to put her new purse on the table. "Do not look so sour. We brought you a bag of popcorn. It is cold now, but you can microwave it." She made it sound like she was doing me a favor by abandoning me. She rewrote the reality of the afternoon until I stood there wondering if maybe I really had missed the knock. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was too withdrawn. I stopped fighting. I started fixing. I became the ghost in the machine of the family. I shoveled the driveway before Dad could ask, chipping away at the thick gray ice until my palms blistered. I fixed the leaking faucet in the downstairs bathroom. I organized the pantry. I babysat Dylan when Vanessa wanted a girls' night out, sitting on the couch while he ignored me, just to save them the cost of a nanny. I heard the adults talking at parties. "Vanessa is a saint," they would say, clinking their wine glasses, taking on a teenager. "That is so brave. And Kiara is so intense. It must be hard for her." Vanessa would sigh, looking tragic. "It is a sacrifice, but family is family. I just want her to feel loved, even if she pushes it away." I wanted to scream. Instead, I retreated to the garage. The garage was unheated and smelled of motor oil and dust, but it was the only place in the world where I made sense. I set up a corner behind the stack of winter tires. I went to yard sales and bought broken electronics with the few dollars I saved from skipping school lunches. Old radios, a cracked toaster, a computer tower from the 90s that hummed like a dying airplane. I took them apart. I laid the green circuit boards out on the concrete floor like maps of a city I could actually understand. A broken circuit was honest. If a wire was cut, the current stopped. It didn't lie to you. It didn't tell you it loved you and then leave you behind. It just broke. And if you were smart enough, you could fix it. That was where I found logic. That was where I learned that if you control the input, you control the output. When I was 16, I noticed Dad was stressed about money. His small plumbing business was bleeding cash. He spent hours at the kitchen table staring at receipts, complaining about the cost of fuel and how his drivers were crisscrossing the city inefficiently. I saw the problem immediately. It was a routing issue. I took the old computer in the garage and spent 3 weeks writing a program. It was crude. It was written in basic code, running on an operating system that was obsolete before I was born. But it worked. I input the addresses of his clients, the traffic patterns, and the fuel mileage of his vans. The program spit out an optimized schedule that grouped jobs by location. I printed it out. It was 12 pages of dot matrix paper. I brought it to him one evening. I thought, this is it. This is how I earn my place. "Dad, look," I said, spreading the papers over his mess of receipts. "I wrote this for you. If your drivers follow this route, you will save about 15% on fuel this month. It also cuts down overtime because they will not be stuck in rush hour." Dad looked at the papers. He squinted at the code. He looked at me, surprised. "You did this?" "Yes," I said, my heart hammering. "It works. I tested it with last month's data." He nodded slowly. "Huh, okay, leave it here." 2 weeks later, at dinner, Dad was beaming. He opened a bottle of wine, something he rarely did. "Great news," he announced. "We are in the black this month. Saved nearly $400 on gas alone." I sat up straighter, waiting for him to look at me, waiting for the nod. Vanessa reached over and squeezed his hand. "Oh, Robert, that is wonderful. I told you that you needed to get organized." Dad smiled at her, his eyes full of affection. "You were right, honey. You are always telling me to be more efficient. I am glad I finally listened to your advice about managing the routes better. Vanessa really has a head for numbers, doesn't she, kids?" I froze. My fork hovered halfway to my mouth. Vanessa did not correct him. She did not say, "Actually, Robert, Kiara wrote the code." She did not point to me. She just preened. She smoothed her hair and smiled that shark-like smile. "Well, I just want to see you succeed. Darling, behind every great man, right?" Uncle Mark, who was stuffing his face with mashed potatoes, pointed his fork at her. You are a keeper. Vanessa, smart and beautiful. Robert, you won the lottery. I looked at Dad. He had forgotten. He had completely rewritten the memory of me standing there with the dot matrix paper. In his mind, the success belonged to the team of Robert and Vanessa. I was just the extra sitting at the end of the table. I stood up. I could not breathe. Where are you going? Vanessa asked sharply. We are celebrating. I am not hungry, I said. Don't be dramatic, Uncle Mark called out. Sit down and eat your potatoes. Always having a mood swing. This one. I walked out. I went to the garage and sat in the freezing cold, staring at the old computer monitor until my eyes burned. But the moment that truly broke me, the moment that turned my sadness into a cold, hard resolve, happened a month later. I was coming home from school early because a teacher was sick. I walked into the house quietly, a habit I had developed to avoid drawing attention. Vanessa and Uncle Mark were in the kitchen drinking coffee. She is just so heavy, Vanessa was saying. Her voice was low, conspiratorial. It is like living with a dark cloud. I try, Mark, I really do. But she is so sensitive. She takes everything the wrong way. I know, Mark said sympathetically. You have the patience of a saint. Nessie, most women would have shipped her off to boarding school. She loves playing the victim, Vanessa continued. It is her favorite role. If I buy Dylan a shirt, she looks at me like I have stabbed her. She wants to be oppressed so badly. It is a sickness, really. I think she is jealous of the happiness we have built here. I stood in the hallway, clutching my backpack straps. Plays the victim. The words seared into my brain. It was not just an insult. It was a strategy. By labeling me a victim player, she inoculated everyone against my pain. If I complained, I was playing the role. If I cried, I was manipulating them. If I pointed out the abuse, I was jealous. She had built a narrative cage, and she had locked me inside it. I did not storm in. I did not scream. I turned around and walked back out the front door, closing it silently behind me. I went back to the garage. I sat amidst my broken machines, my logic, my wires. I realized then that I could never win in that house. I could never be the protagonist of my own life as long as I lived under their roof. In the story of the Pierce family, Vanessa was the heroine, Dad was the prize, Dylan was the prince, and Mark was the narrator. I was just a footnote. I was a typo they were trying to edit out. I picked up a screwdriver and drove it into the hard wood of the workbench, twisting it until my knuckles turned white. Okay, I thought, if I am just a footnote, I will be the most expensive footnote you ever tried to delete. That was the day the crying stopped. That was the day I started planning my exit. And that was the day I realized that family is not blood. Family is a liability you have to manage before it bankrupts you. The ticket out of that house came in a thick white envelope embossed with the navy blue seal of the Lakeshore Institute of Technology. I remember holding it in the driveway, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped the mail into a puddle of melting slush. It was not just an acceptance letter. It was a pardon. It was a lifeline thrown to a drowning swimmer. Full tuition, room and board, a stipend for books. It meant that for the first time in my life, my survival did not depend on Vanessa's mood swings or my father's willful blindness. I walked into the kitchen, the envelope pressed against my chest like a shield. I wanted to scream. I wanted to dance. I wanted to see a flicker of pride in my father's eyes, just for a second. I got in, I said, placing the letter on the table between the salt shaker and Vanessa's diet soda. I got the scholarship. I am going to Chicago. Dad looked up from his newspaper. He blinked, processing the information slowly. Chicago? That is 4 hours away. Kiara. It is a great school. Dad, I said, my voice tight. It is one of the best for computer science in the country, and it is free. You do not have to pay a dime. Vanessa did not look at the letter. She looked at the window, staring at her own reflection in the darkening glass. Well, she said, her voice dripping with a quiet, poisonous sorrow. I suppose we should have expected this. You have always thought you were too good for this town. Too good for us. I am not, I started, but she cut me off. You are abandoning your family, Kiara. Just when Dylan is starting high school and needs his big sister, but that is fine. Go. Not everyone has the privilege to just run away to the big city and play student while the rest of us work to keep a roof over our heads. Privilege. I stood there, thinking about the nights I spent repairing neighbors' broken toasters for $5, the hours I spent coding on a computer that sounded like a lawnmower, the fact that I was leaving because I could not breathe in this house, but Vanessa had already flipped the script. In her version of the story, I was the selfish elitist, and she was the martyr left behind to pick up the pieces. Dad sighed, rubbing his temples. We will miss you, honey. But if Vanessa says it is going to be hard on the family, maybe you should think about commuting to the local college instead. I snatched the letter back. No. I said, I am going. I left that fall. I packed my life into 2 suitcases and a backpack, and I never looked back. Or at least, I tried not to. But gravity is a funny thing. No matter how far you run, the black hole of a toxic family always tries to pull you back in. It happened during winter break of my junior year. I was 20 years old. I was not a child anymore. I was a Dean's List student, a teaching assistant for an introductory coding class, and an adult woman who paid her own phone bill. I came home for a week because guilt is a powerful drug, and Dad had sounded so tired on the phone. The tension in the house was palpable from the moment I walked through the door. The plumbing business was struggling again. Dad looked 10 years older, his hairline receding, his shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. And then there was Dylan. Dylan was 18 now, and he had decided that college was a scam. Instead, he was going to be an entrepreneur. That week, his great idea was a drop-shipping business selling cheap smartwatches. I sat at the kitchen island on a Tuesday afternoon, watching Vanessa write a check. It needs to be $2,000. Mom, Dylan whined, leaning against the counter. The inventory costs money. You have to spend money to make money. Vanessa signed the check with a flourish and ripped it out of the book. Of course, baby. I believe in you. You are going to be the next Bezos. I watched her hand over $2,000 of my father's hard-earned money to a boy who had quit his last 3 jobs after less than a week because the managers were mean to him. I could not help it. The words slipped out. Dad said the business account is overdrawn, I said quietly. He is stressed about making payroll for the drivers next week. Is now really the time to be funding another one of Dylan's hobbies? The air in the kitchen vanished. Dylan grabbed the check and sneered at me. Shut up, Kiara. You are just jealous because I actually have vision. Go back to your nerd school. He stormed out. Vanessa turned to me. She was not wearing her usual mask of passive-aggressive sweetness. Her face was contorted, ugly, with a rage that had been festering for years. Who do you think you are? She asked, her voice low and trembling. You come into my house, eat my food, and judge how I raise my son? I am not judging. Vanessa, I am stating facts. Dad is broke. You are bleeding him dry to fund Dylan's delusions. I stood up. I was taller than her now. I was 20 years old. I was an adult speaking to another adult. That was my mistake. I thought the rules of engagement had changed because I had grown up. I thought physical violence was something that happened to helpless children, not to women who could vote and drive cars. I was wrong. Vanessa stepped into my personal space. You ungrateful little parasite, she spat. You have never cared about this family. You just want to see us fail so you can feel superior. I am not the one spending money we do not have, I said, holding my ground. She snapped. It wasn't a slap at first. It was a shove. She lunged forward, placing both hands on my chest, and pushed me with all her strength. I stumbled back. My hip bone collided hard with the granite edge of the island. The pain was sharp and white-hot, stealing the breath from my lungs. I gasped, clutching my side. Vanessa, what the hell? She didn't stop. She closed the distance between us, her eyes wide and manic. She swung her hand. Crack. Her palm connected with the side of my face. It was not a corrective tap. It was a full-force strike. the rings on her fingers, the diamond anniversary band Dad had bought her, the sapphire cocktail ring she insisted she needed, bit into my cheek. My head snapped to the side. My ear started ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the hum of the refrigerator. She hit me again, backhanded this time. "You are ruining everything," she screamed, striking my shoulder, my arm, my face. "You are poison. Kiara, you are trying to destroy my family." I put my arms up to shield my face, backing away until my spine hit the refrigerator. I was 20 years old. I could have fought back. I could have grabbed her wrists. I could have pushed her down. I was younger, stronger. But I froze. The little girl inside me, the one who had spent a decade trying to be invisible, took over the controls. I just stood there and took it, shaking, while a 45-year-old woman beat me in her kitchen because I dared to speak the truth about a check. When she finally stopped, she was panting, her hair disheveled. She looked at her own hands, then at me, as if surprised to find us there. I slid sideways, escaping the corner, and ran. I locked myself in the bathroom. I looked in the mirror. My cheek was already swelling, a bright, angry red that would turn purple by morning. There was a cut near my ear where her diamond had caught the skin. A trickle of blood ran down my neck. I was shaking so hard my teeth chattered. This wasn't discipline. This wasn't parental correction. This was assault, simple battery. If a stranger had done this to me on the street, they would be in handcuffs. I waited until Dad came home. I sat in the living room, pressing a bag of frozen peas to my face. When he walked in, he stopped dead. What happened? I lowered the ice pack. "Vanessa," I said, my voice flat. She attacked me, because I asked about the money she gave Dylan. Dad closed his eyes. He did not rush to me. He did not yell for Vanessa. He let out a long, weary sigh, like a man whose favorite football team had just lost a game. "Oh, Kiara," he said. "Look at my face, Dad," I said, pointing to the cut. She hit me, repeatedly. She shoved me into the counter. Dad walked over to the liquor cabinet and poured himself a scotch. His hands were steady, too steady. "You know Vanessa is hot-tempered," he said, taking a sip. "She is under a lot of pressure with the holidays. You shouldn't have provoked her." "Provoked her?" I stood up, the ice pack falling to the floor. I asked a question about finances. "That is not provocation for assault." "Lower your voice," he hissed, looking toward the stairs. "Do not make this a bigger deal than it is. She feels bad. She is upstairs crying right now." "She is crying?" I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "Dad, I am the one bleeding. Just let it go. Kiara, please, for me. Do not poke the bear." That evening, Uncle Mark came over. He saw my face. He saw the swelling. "Vanessa told me you guys got into a little scrap," he said, chuckling as he opened a beer. "A scrap?" I stared at him. "She beat me. Mark." He rolled his eyes. "Oh, stop it. You make it sound like she took a baseball bat to you. It was a couple of slaps. My mother used to chase me with a wooden spoon until I was 16. It builds character." "I am 20, I whispered. "I am an adult." "Then act like one," he snapped, his jovial face hardening. "You pierce women. You love the drama. You love to make everything a tragedy. You pushed her buttons. She snapped. It happens. Grow up. Put some makeup on it, and come eat dinner." I did not eat dinner. I sat in my room, listening to them laugh downstairs. I realized then that I was alone in a way that was absolute. There was no protector coming. There was no misunderstood parent who would wake up and save me. There were only 3 adults downstairs who had agreed on a version of reality where my pain was an inconvenience and Vanessa's rage was a natural disaster that couldn't be helped. The next morning, Vanessa performed her penance. I was packing my bag, ready to leave 3 days early. She stood in my doorway, holding a cup of tea. Her eyes were red-rimmed, whether from crying or lack of sleep. I didn't know. "Kiara," she said softly. I did not look up. I kept folding my shirts. "I am sorry about yesterday," she said. I lost control a little bit. I have been so stressed with your father's business failing and worrying about Dylan. It is just so much. I zipped my suitcase. But, she added, her voice hardening just a fraction, you have to admit, Kiara, your tone was very disrespectful. You came at me so aggressively. You know how that triggers me. If you hadn't spoken to me like that, none of this would have happened. There it was. I'm sorry. But the apology that blamed the victim. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had made my childhood a minefield and was now trying to colonize my adulthood. Okay, Vanessa, I said. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just said, okay. I walked past her, down the stairs, and out the door. Dad was in the driveway, kicking the tires of his truck. Leaving already? He asked, looking guilty. Yes, I said. I have to study. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. Here, for gas. And try to call Vanessa later? Smooth things over? I looked at the $20. It was hush money. It was the price of my dignity. I took it. Thanks, Dad. I drove back to Chicago in silence. The highway stretched out before me, gray and endless. My cheek throbbed with every beat of my heart. When I got back to my dorm room, it was empty. My roommate was still away for the holidays. I sat on my narrow twin bed, surrounded by textbooks and the hum of the radiator. I touched my face. The bruise was blooming, yellow and purple, shaped like a map of a country I never wanted to visit again. I opened my laptop. I did not cry. I was done crying. Crying was for children who thought their tears could change the minds of the people hurting them. I knew better now. In my family, my pain was a currency that had been devalued to zero. Vanessa's feelings were the gold standard. I created a new folder on my hard drive. I named it System Logs. I opened a blank document. December 28th, 2018. I typed 2:30 p.m. I wrote it all down. Every word she screamed, the shove, the impact, the slaps, Dad's reaction, Mark's mockery. Then I turned on my webcam. The green light blinked on. An unblinking eye. I took a photo of my face. I turned my head and took a photo of the cut behind my ear. I lifted my shirt and took a photo of the massive, dark bruise forming on my hip where I hit the counter. I saved the files. I encrypted the folder with a password that was a string of random numbers and letters 20 characters long. I wasn't doing this because I planned to sue them. Not yet. I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it because I knew they would try to rewrite this. In a month, Vanessa would say I tripped. In a year, Dad would say it was just a little argument. In 5 years, Mark would say I imagined the whole thing because I was crazy. They could steal my childhood. They could steal my father's money. They could steal my sense of safety. But they would not steal the truth. I looked at the digital image of my battered face on the screen. Never again. I thought, next time you touch me, I will not be a daughter. I will be a plaintiff. I closed the laptop, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for an apology I would never get. I was waiting for the moment the interest on this debt would come due. If the violence in my father's kitchen was the fire that burned my innocence to the ground, then Flowgrid was the phoenix that rose from the ash. I did not go back to Chicago to cry. I went back to build a weapon. I stopped going to parties. I stopped dating. I stopped answering texts from friends who wanted to get brunch on Sundays. I poured every ounce of my obsession, every drop of my need for fairness, into a Linux terminal. Flowgrid started as that crude routing script for my dad's plumbing vans, but in the computer lab at Lakeshore, it mutated into something alive. My life became a blur of blue light and caffeine. I worked 2 part-time jobs to keep my student loans from drowning me. By day, I was a barista at a shop where the customers screamed if their foam was not micro enough. By night, I worked the graveyard shift at the campus library, shelving books while my brain ran algorithms in the background. I slept on a futon that I had pulled out of a dumpster and sanitized with bleach. My apartment was a closet in a neighborhood where the police sirens were the nightly lullaby. I ate instant oatmeal for dinner 5 nights a week. My shoes had holes in the soles, and I put cardboard inside them to keep the snow out. But on my screen, I was a god. I was building a logic engine that could look at chaos, traffic jams, weather patterns, fuel costs, driver fatigue, and reorganize it into perfect, efficient harmony. It was the one place in the world where effort equaled result. If the code was clean, it worked. It did not matter if the code was a girl, or poor, or unloved. It just worked. The breakthrough happened in my senior year. I found a beta tester. It was a small courier company called Dash Delivery on the south side of the city. The owner, a man named Mr. Henderson, was 2 weeks away from bankruptcy. He had 5 vans, 3 drivers who were threatening to quit, and a fuel bill that was eating him alive. I walked into his office, which smelled of stale cigar smoke and panic. "Give me 1 week," I told him. "Put this tablet in your driver's hands. Follow the route exactly. If I do not save you 20% on fuel, I will work for free for a month cleaning your vans." He looked at me like I was crazy. He saw a skinny college student in a thrift store coat, but desperation makes people open-minded. "Okay," he grunted. "1 week?" I did not sleep that week. I monitored the data feed from my dorm room like mission control. I tweaked the algorithm in real time. I routed his drivers around construction that Google Maps hadn't even flagged yet. On Friday afternoon, Mr. Henderson called me. "Come in," he said. I took the bus down there, my stomach in knots. Had I failed? Had I crashed his system? When I walked in, he wasn't sitting behind his desk. He was standing by the door. He was a big man, rough around the edges, the kind of guy who probably reminded me of Uncle Mark in another life. But he didn't sneer. He pulled me into a bear hug that smelled of diesel and cheap cologne. "You saved us, kid," he choked out. He was crying, a grown man, crying over logistics. "We are in the black. For the first time in 2 years, I can pay the rent." He wrote me a check for $500. It was not a lot of money, but it was the first time an adult had looked at something I made and said thank you instead of "you are overreacting." That $500 felt heavier than gold. It was proof. I wasn't useless. I wasn't a burden. I was valuable. Word spread. It turns out the logistics world is small, and people talk. Dash Delivery told a medical supply distributor about the crazy girl with the magic software. The distributor called me. They were having trouble getting dialysis fluid to clinics on time during rush hour. Suddenly, the stakes weren't just cardboard boxes. They were kidneys. They were insulin. They were blood bags. I rewrote the core engine. I added prioritization protocols for emergency cargo. I spent nights visualizing the streets of Chicago not as asphalt, but as veins and arteries. My code was the heartbeat pushing the lifeblood to where it needed to go. When the medical distributor cut their late deliveries by 40% in the first month, I knew I had something dangerous. I had something that could change an industry. Then came Silverline Freight Systems. They were a massive conglomerate, the kind of company that owned the trucks, the warehouses, and half the politicians in the state. They approached me 6 months after I graduated. I walked into their headquarters downtown. The glass tower was intimidating, designed to make you feel small. I wore a suit I had bought at an outlet store, and I carried my laptop in a bag that had a frayed strap. The conference room was 40 feet long. At the end of it sat 5 men in gray suits. They looked at me, and I saw the same look Uncle Mark used to give me. They saw a girl. They saw a target. They offered me $200,000 for the IP. "It is a generous offer," the lead negotiator said, smiling like a shark. "It pays off your student loans, buys you a nice car. You should take it. Sweetheart, you do not want the headache of running a company." Sweetheart. That word triggered something in me. It sounded like practical. It sounded like overreacting. I stood up. I closed my laptop. "Thank you for the coffee," I said, my voice steady. The negotiator blinked. "Excuse me?" "I am leaving. Flowgrid is saving my current clients an average of 32% on operational costs. Based on your fleet size, my software would save you roughly $14 million in the first year alone. And you offer me $200,000? I slung my bag over my shoulder. "I think we are done here. I have a meeting with Northbridge Transit Group in an hour. I did not have a meeting with Northbridge Transit Group. I was bluffing with a pair of twos. But the air in the room changed. The predator became the prey. "Sit down, Ms. Schwartz," the man said. His smile was gone. "Let us talk numbers." The negotiation lasted 6 hours. They tried to bully me. They tried to confuse me with legal jargon. They tried to gaslight me into thinking my code was buggy. But I had spent 10 years living with Vanessa. I had a PhD in surviving gaslighting. Every time they tried to undercut me, I pushed back harder. I channeled every freezing night in the garage, every slap in the kitchen, every Christmas I spent watching Dylan open gifts I couldn't have. I wasn't negotiating for money. I was negotiating for my existence. When we finally agreed on the number, the room was silent. $28 million. It was a buyout, a complete acquisition of the code and a 3-year non-compete clause. The closing took place 2 weeks later. There was no ceremony, there was no champagne popping, just a digital tablet and a stylus. I signed my name, Kiara Schwartz. I watched the man across the table tap a few keys on his secure terminal. "Transfer complete," he said, bored. I checked my phone. I opened my banking app. There it was, a string of numbers so long it barely fit on the screen. 28,000,000. I walked out of the building and into the sunlight on Wacker Drive. The wind whipped my hair across my face. People rushed past me, talking on phones, eating sandwiches, worrying about rent. I stood by the river and waited to feel happy. I waited for the urge to jump up and down. It didn't come. Instead, I felt a profound, echoing silence. I was rich, I was free, and I had absolutely no one to call. I couldn't call Dad. He would tell Vanessa, and she would find a way to claim it was actually her idea because she encouraged me to be practical. I couldn't call Uncle Mark. He would ask for a loan. I was alone on the mountaintop. It was cold up here, but at least no one could hit me. I went to work, not on code, but on erasing my past. I paid off my student loans in a single click. I paid off the credit card debt I had racked up buying servers. Then, I set up a blind trust. I endowed a scholarship fund for students at community colleges who came from single-parent homes or foster care. I wanted to be the lifeline for someone else that I never had. Then I started hunting. I needed a fortress. I did not want a house in the suburbs with a white picket fence. That was the lie Vanessa sold. I wanted height. I wanted security. I wanted to look down on the world that had tried to crush me. I found it through a private broker who specialized in discreet clients. It was a penthouse on the 45th floor, overlooking Millennium Park. It was not on the public market. The previous owner was a tech mogul who had gone to prison for tax evasion, and the bank wanted to offload it quietly. I walked in for the viewing. The floors were raw concrete. The walls were unfinished, but the glass wrapped around the entire apartment, 30 feet high. I stood in the center of the empty space. I felt like I was floating. "I will take it," I told the broker, cash. I bought it through an LLC I named 01 Holdings, an anonymous limited liability company. If anyone searched the deed, they would see a faceless corporate entity, not the name of Robert Pierce's daughter. The first night I spent there, I didn't have any furniture. I hadn't even turned on the electricity yet. I lay on the floor in a sleeping bag, the hard concrete pressing against my spine. Outside, Chicago was a sea of amber and white lights. I could see the cars moving like blood cells in the arteries I had spent years optimizing. I stared up at the dark ceiling. I thought about the girl in the garage. I thought about the girl who apologized for being beaten. I am not her anymore. I whispered to the empty room. I sat up. I had bought one thing from the hardware store on my way over, a small brass hook and a screwdriver. I walked over to the wall right next to the massive sliding glass door that led to the balcony. I lined up the screw. I twisted it into the drywall, the metal biting into the plaster with a satisfying crunch. I took the keys to the penthouse, the heavy electronic fob and the silver physical key for the deadlock, and I hung them on the hook. It was a small gesture, a nothing moment, but to me, it was a ritual. In my father's house, I never had a key. I had to knock. I had to wait to be let in. I had to hope they hadn't locked the door to teach me a lesson about coming home late from the library. But here, the keys were on the hook. I could leave whenever I wanted. I could lock the world out whenever I wanted. I looked at that brass hook glinting in the moonlight. This is the baseline, I told myself. This is the floor. I will never sink below this again. And I promised myself one more thing. I promised that if I ever let anyone into this sanctuary, it would be on my terms. I would never set a place at my table for someone who made me feel like I should be grateful for the crumbs. I fell asleep on the floor of my $28 million glass castle, and for the first time in 10 years, I did not dream of running away. I was already home. The vibration of the phone against the marble countertop stops, but the silence it leaves behind is heavy. I look at the screen one last time, at that pathetic, single-word surrender. Okay. For a few seconds, the old Kiara, the teenager shivering in the garage, the 20-year-old icing her cheek, wants to crawl into bed and sleep until January 2nd. But then, something shifts. It is a mechanical click in my brain. The same sound I hear when a line of code finally snaps into place. I am not that girl anymore. I am the CEO of 01 Holdings. I solve logistics problems for a living. And this? This is just a routing error. The family node is congested and toxic. The solution is not to force a connection. The solution is to build a new network. I open my laptop. The blue light washes over my face, and I crack my knuckles. Project. Outcast, New Year. I start with Maya. Maya is my cousin on my mom's side, though she grew up in Denver. We used to be close until life and distance, and Vanessa's passive-aggressive hosting, drove a wedge between the branches of the family tree. I dial her number. It rings 4 times. Hello? Her voice sounds tired. It is 7 in the evening in Denver, which means she is probably wrestling her 2 toddlers into pajamas. Hey, Maya, I say. It is Kiara. Kiara! She sounds surprised, then immediately guarded. Is everything okay? Did something happen with Uncle Robert? No, I say quickly. Everyone is fine. Well, everyone is the same. I just got the text from Dad. The one about the simple New Year. Maya lets out a long, dry laugh. Oh, you got the boot too? I got a text from Vanessa yesterday. She said they were keeping it intimate this year because Dylan needs focused family time to recover from his latest business failure. Or maybe she said, venture transition. I stopped listening after she implied my kids were too loud last year. I lean against the kitchen island. I remember last year, Vanessa spent the whole night following Maya's 4-year-old around with a coaster, looking like she was about to call a SWAT team if a drop of juice hit the floor. Yeah, I say, I got the boot. So, what are your plans? Maya sighs. Honestly, pizza rolls and Disney movies. The boys will be asleep by 9, and I will probably fall asleep on the couch by 10. It is fine. It is cheaper this way. I want you to come to Chicago. I say. There is a pause. What? I want you to come here, to my place. Bring the boys. Kiara, that is sweet, but I cannot. Plane tickets are insane right now. And getting a hotel in the city on New Year's Eve? It would cost a month's rent. Plus, the boys are a handful, and I cut her off. I am handling the tickets. I am handling the transport. And you do not need a hotel. I have plenty of room. You have plenty of room? She sounds skeptical. Last she heard, I was living in a studio apartment near the university. Kiara, are you sure? We are talking about 2 toddlers who think parkour is a valid way to move across furniture. Trust me, I say, looking around at my 3,000 square feet of empty minimalist space. It is time you saw where I really live. I can hear the gears turning in her head. She is looking for the catch. In our family, there is always a catch. If someone buys you dinner, they want to criticize your career choices. If they invite you over, they want you to clean something. No catch. Maya, I say softly, just us. just the people who aren't allowed at the grown-up table. I hear a small sniffle on the other end. Okay, yeah, let us do it. Next is Aunt Lila in Phoenix. Lila is the family eccentric. She wears caftans, dyes her hair a different shade of purple every 6 months, and has a laugh that can shatter glass. Vanessa hates her. She says Lila is uncouth. Lila picks up on the first ring. Kiara, darling, to what do I owe the pleasure? Are you finally running away to join the circus? Close, I say. I am hosting a party, and you are the guest of honor. She gasps. A party? Is Vanessa allowed? Because if she is coming, I will need to bring my holy water. Vanessa is not invited. I say. Lila screeches with delight. I am packing my bags. Do I need a coat? Oh, who cares? I will wear 5 sweaters. Get me out of this desert. Honey, I am dying for some real drama, not the kind Vanessa manufactures. I call Jonah in Detroit. He is 22, playing bass in a band that pays him in beer tickets and living on a futon. When I offer to fly him in, he goes silent for a full 10 seconds. You mean, like, on a plane? He asks. Not a bus? A plane, Jonah, and a car will pick you up at O'Hare. Dude, he whispers, I was literally going to eat cereal for New Year's. I am in. Then I call my friends. Sarah, who is stuck in the city because she can't afford the flight back to Oregon. Ben, whose parents disowned him last year when he came out. Within an hour, the list is set. 12 people, 12 outcasts. 12 broken pieces that are going to form a mosaic right here in my living room. Now the logistics. This is where I shine. I open my browser and start moving fast. I book the flights. I do not book economy. I book business class for Lila because she has bad knees. I book a row of seats for Maya so the kids can spread out. I see the total cost ticking up on the screen, thousands of dollars in a matter of minutes. And for the first time, the money doesn't feel like a cold number in a bank account. It feels like a tool. It feels like a weapon against loneliness. I call Harbor and Hearth. It is a small, family-owned bistro in the West Loop that makes the kind of food that tastes like a memory of a better childhood. When the catering manager answers, I explain what I need. No foam. I say firmly, no deconstructed anything. I do not want food that looks like art. I want food that tastes like home. I order roasted salmon with a maple glaze. I order huge bowls of homemade pasta with wild mushrooms and cream. I order a winter salad with roasted squash and pomegranate seeds. And for dessert, I do not want a tower of macarons. I want hot cocoa. I tell him, the real kind, with melted chocolate, heavy cream, and homemade marshmallows, and maybe some warm apple cider donuts. I can hear the man smiling through the phone. We can do that, Ms. Schwartz. Sounds like a cozy night. It will be, I say. Next, music. I don't want a DJ. A DJ means shouting. A DJ means trying to be cool. I find a local jazz trio that usually plays at a dive bar on Tuesdays. I hire them for the night, offering triple their usual rate. Just play the standards, I tell the pianist. Nothing frantic, just warm, like we are in a movie where nothing bad happens. Then, the details, the Kiara touches. I think about Maya's boys. They are 4 and 6. They have never seen fireworks from 45 stories up. It is going to be loud. The sonic boom from the Navy Pier show rattles the windows up here. I go to Amazon and order 3 pairs of high-end noise-canceling headphones, the kind they use on construction sites, but sized for kids, in bright neon colors. I want them to see the lights without the fear. I want them to know that in this house, their comfort is a priority, not an afterthought. I start thinking about gifts. In the Pierce household, gifts were performative. You gave things to show how much money you spent, or you gave practical things to send a message about someone's flaws. I want to give things that say, I see you. For Aunt Lila, I find a vintage fountain pen from the 1950s, restored. She still writes handwritten letters to everyone, even though no one writes back. I want her to know her words matter. For Jonah, I find a custom leather guitar strap, hand-tooled. He has been using a piece of duct tape to hold his base up for 2 years. For Maya, I order a heated plush throw blanket. She is always cold, always shivering in her thin sweaters because she spends all her money on coats for her kids. I want her to be warm. I spend the next 2 days turning the penthouse from a showroom into a home. I rearrange the furniture. I push the sleek, uncomfortable designer chairs to the walls. I bring in big, soft beanbags for the kids. I rent a long, farmhouse-style wooden table and place it right in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. I set the table myself. No white tablecloths. I use a runner of evergreen branches and pine cones. I place candles everywhere, electric ones, so the kids won't burn themselves. There is no kids' table in the corner. Everyone sits together. I take out a stack of thick cardstock and a calligraphy pen. My handwriting is not perfect, but it is mine. I write the name of every guest. Underneath their name, I do not write Table 5 or Seat A. I write, "Thank you for being here." On the morning of the 31st, I set up one last thing. I place a small, high-quality digital camera on the bookshelf, nestled between a stack of coding manuals and a vase. I set it to record, but I turn the tally light off so no one will feel self-conscious. This is not for Instagram. There will be no hashtags. There will be no "look at my amazing life" post to make Vanessa jealous. If I post it, I am playing her game. I am seeking validation. This footage is for us. It is evidence. I want proof that we were happy. I want proof that a holiday can happen without screaming, without passive-aggressive comments, without someone crying in the bathroom. By 4 in the afternoon, the snow starts to fall. Big, fat flakes drift past the window, swirling in the wind updrafts between the skyscrapers. The city below is turning into a white, muffled wonderland. I stand in the middle of the living room. The smell of pine and roasting meat is already drifting from the kitchen where the catering team is prepping. The jazz trio is setting up in the corner, the drummer lightly brushing the snare to test the sound. I am wearing a cashmere sweater and jeans. I am barefoot. My phone buzzes in my pocket, probably a notification from the airline app saying Maya's flight has landed. I take a deep breath, filling my lungs with the warm, savory air. For 26 years, every holiday was a minefield of permission. Can I sit here? Can I speak now? Is this outfit okay? Am I smiling enough? I look at the long table, the empty chairs waiting to be filled, the city lights beginning to flicker on below me. I realize, with a jolt that nearly brings me to my knees, that I did not ask anyone if I could do this. I did not ask Dad if it was in the budget. I did not ask Vanessa if it clashed with her aesthetic. I built this. I paid for this. I own this. The doorbell rings. It is not the doorbell of fear. It is not the police. It is the concierge from the lobby, calling up. "Ms. Schwartz, your first guests have arrived. A Ms. Maya and 2 very energetic young men." "Send them up," I say, and my voice does not shake. "Send them all up." I walk toward the door, not as a daughter, not as a victim, and not as a ghost. I walk toward the door as the hostess of the only party in Chicago that actually matters. The elevator doors slid open with a soft, expensive hush, revealing the first of my guests. It was Maya, holding the hands of her 2 boys, Leo and Sam. She was wearing a thick winter coat that looked like it had seen at least 5 winters, and her face was pinched with the exhaustion of travel and the anticipation of disappointment. She expected a studio apartment. She expected a futon and maybe a cramped kitchenette where we would bump elbows while heating up frozen pizza. She stepped out, took one look at the expanse of white oak flooring stretching toward the 30-foot glass walls, and dropped her duffel bag. Thud. The sound echoed in the quiet luxury of the penthouse. "Oh my God," Maya whispered. Behind her, the boys didn't hesitate. They didn't care about the architecture or the price per square foot. They saw the sky. They broke free from her grip and sprinted across the room, their sneakers squeaking on the wood. "Leo! Sam! Be careful!" Maya shouted, panic flaring in her voice, the reflex of a mother used to being in houses where children were treated as breakage risks. I stepped forward, smiling. It is okay. Maya, the glass is shatterproof. Let them run. The boys pressed their faces and hands against the floor-to-ceiling window. Below us, Chicago was a sea of glittering electric jewels. The skating rink in Millennium Park was a glowing oval. The cars on Lakeshore Drive were ribbons of red and white light, and the dark expanse of Lake Michigan swallowed the horizon. "Mom!" Leo yelled, his breath fogging the glass. "Look! The cars are like ants. They are tiny electric ants." I walked over to a large wicker basket by the sofa and pulled out 2 thick, hand-knit wool blankets. I walked over to the boys. I didn't scold them for smudging the glass. I didn't tell them to stand back. I knelt down, wrapping the blankets around their small shoulders like superhero capes. "You guys are the giants up here," I told them. "That is why they look like ants. You are bigger than the whole city tonight." Sam looked at me with wide eyes, pulling the blanket tighter. "Are we allowed to touch the window?" "Aunt Vanessa says windows are for looking, not touching." My heart pinched, but I kept my smile bright. "In this house," I said, tapping his nose, "windows are for whatever you want them to be. Touch away. We have Windex." By the time the elevator dinged again, Maya was sitting on one of the plush beanbags I had bought, clutching a glass of vintage Cabernet like it was a life preserver, staring at the ceiling with tears in her eyes. Aunt Lila arrived next. She swept in wearing a faux fur coat that was 3 sizes too big and purple, looking like a fabulous, eccentric grape. She stopped dead in the entryway, her eyes scanning the minimalist fireplace, the chef's kitchen, and the view. She turned to me, her mouth hanging open. Then she started laughing. It was a deep, belly-shaking laugh. "Kiara Schwartz," she declared, pointing a manicured finger at me. "You little devil. You are secretly richer than every man in this family combined, aren't you?" I took her coat, hanging it up. "I do okay. Aunt Lila." "Okay." She walked over to the kitchen island and ran her hand along the marble. "Honey, this isn't okay. I bought the bank money. Does Robert know? Does Vanessa know?" "Oh, please tell me Vanessa knows. I want to see her face melt." "They do not know," I said quietly, "and for tonight, it does not matter. Tonight is just for us." Jonah arrived last, carrying his battered guitar case. When he saw the space, he didn't say anything. He just walked to the window, pressed his forehead against it, and stood there for a long time. When he turned around, he looked at me and gave a nod. It was the nod of someone who understood what it cost to get here. The atmosphere in the room shifted as the sun went down completely. The jazz trio I had hired began to play in the corner. Soft, rhythmic, an upright bass and a piano weaving a backdrop of warmth that filled the high ceilings. The servers from Harbor and Hearth brought out the food, and this was the moment I had been most anxious about. In the Pierce household, dinner was a performance. There was a head of the table, Dad, a foot of the table, Vanessa, and a strict hierarchy in between. The food was always served to them first. Conversation was controlled. You spoke when spoken to. Tonight, I had set the long wooden table with no head. I placed the platters in the middle, family style. Roasted salmon with maple glaze, steaming and fragrant. Huge ceramic bowls of handmade pasta tossed with wild mushrooms and cream. A winter salad that looked like a jewel box with pomegranate seeds and roasted squash. "Sit anywhere," I announced. "There are no assigned seats." We sat. We passed the bowls. There was the clinking of silverware and the sound of wine being poured. At first, everyone was hesitant. They were waiting for the criticism. They were waiting for someone to say, "You took too much pasta," or "chew quietly." But then, Mrs. Irene spoke up. She was an old friend of my grandmother's. A woman Vanessa had stopped inviting years ago because she didn't fit the vibe of the new, younger Pierce family. Irene was 80 years old, frail, with hands that shook slightly. "This salmon," Irene said, her voice wavering, "it tastes just like the one your grandmother used to make on Good Friday. She used to put maple on it, too." Aunt Lila smiled, a piece of bread halfway to her mouth. "She did. I forgot about that. Do you remember the time she burned the turkey and we had to eat pizza for Thanksgiving? Laughter rippled through the table. Real laughter. Not the polite, nervous titters we usually gave when Uncle Mark told a bad joke. I remember, Maya said, wiping tomato sauce off Leo's chin. I was 6. I thought it was the best Thanksgiving ever. Suddenly, the dam broke. Stories poured out. We talked about the holidays we had spent alone. We talked about the time Vanessa redecorated the living room in all white and banned red wine. We talked about Dylan's endless business ventures that drained the family funds. But it wasn't bitter. It was cathartic. It was like lancing a boil. We were laughing at the absurdity of it all. We were acknowledging that we had all been hurt. And in that acknowledgement, the hurt lost its power. I sat in the middle of the table, watching them. I watched Jonah ask the server for seconds without shame. I watched Maya let her kids eat with their hands without snapping at them. I watched Aunt Lila tell a dirty joke that made Mrs. Irene cackle. I realized that my shoulders were down. My jaw was unclenched. For the first time in my life, I was hosting a party, and I wasn't afraid of the guests. After dinner, we moved to the living area. I brought out a large corkboard I had set up on an easel. Beside it was a stack of colorful index cards and pushpins. Okay, everyone, I said, tapping a glass with a spoon. No resolutions tonight. Resolutions are about fixing things that are wrong with you. We have had enough of people telling us what is wrong with us. Jonah strummed a soft chord on his guitar, providing a soundtrack. Tonight, we set intentions. I continued. We write down what we are leaving behind and what we are taking with us. I went first. I took a marker and wrote in big, bold letters, I intend to stop waiting for permission to be happy. I pinned it to the board. One by one, they came up. Maya wrote, I intend to say no without apologizing. Jonah wrote, I intend to believe my music is a real job. Aunt Lila wrote, I intend to wear whatever I want, even if Vanessa thinks I look like a disco ball. Mrs. Irene, with shaking hands, wrote, I intend to remember that I am still here. The board filled up. It was a mosaic of defiance. It was a declaration of independence. Later in the evening, the jazz band took a break to eat. Jonah picked up his acoustic guitar. He didn't plug it in. He just sat on the edge of the sofa and started playing a simple, strumming version of an old folk song we all knew. One by one, voices joined in. Maya was off-key. Aunt Lila was loud and dramatic. I couldn't carry a tune to save my life, but we sang. We sang at the top of our lungs, drowning out the wind howling outside the glass. I looked over at the bookshelf. The small red light on the camera was not blinking, because I had taped over it, but I knew it was recording. It was capturing Aunt Lila dancing with Leo. It was capturing Mrs. Irene asleep in the armchair with a smile on her face. It was capturing me, sitting on the floor, laughing so hard my sides hurt because Jonah had changed the lyrics to make fun of Uncle Mark's toupee. It was the most beautiful footage I would ever own. But while we were lost in the moment, technology was doing what technology does. Maya's oldest son, a teenager named Ethan, who had been quiet most of the night, was standing by the balcony door. He was 14, the same age I was when Vanessa moved in. He had his phone out. He wasn't malicious. He was just a kid impressed by the view. He opened Instagram. He aimed his camera at the room, at the laughing adults, the expensive furniture, the sprawling city lights, and the sudden bloom of a test firework exploding over the lake in the distance. He recorded a 10-second clip. Pan across the room, zoom in on the fireworks, pan back to Kiara laughing. He typed a caption, Family New Year. Aunt Kiara is actually a baller. Then, the fatal mistake. He tapped the location tag. Pierce Penthouse, Chicago. He hit post. He posted it to his close friend's story, thinking it was safe. He thought he was just showing off to his buddies from school. He didn't know that one of his close friends was his cousin Dylan. I didn't see him do it. I was too busy watching Aunt Lila try to teach Sam how to waltz. I stepped back from the group, leaning against the cold glass of the window, feeling the vibration of the music in the floorboards. I looked at the reflection of the room in the window. It was superimposed over the city, a ghostly image of warmth floating above the cold streets. For the first time, the two halves of my life, the cold, logical professional, and the warm, hidden human, were merging. I looked at the clock. It was 11:30, 30 minutes to midnight. In 30 minutes, the sky would explode with light. In 30 minutes, we would toast to a new year. But hundreds of miles away, in a house in Ohio that smelled of lavender and judgment, a phone was buzzing. I imagined the scene: Vanessa, holding a glass of cheap champagne, scrolling through her phone because she was bored with her simple celebration. I imagined her tapping on Dylan's screen when he said, "Mom, look at this." I imagined the confusion. Pierce Penthouse? I imagined the realization dawning on her face as she saw the view. The furniture. The unmistakable skyline of Chicago that I wasn't supposed to be able to afford. She would see Aunt Lila wearing a fur coat. She would see Maya drinking expensive wine. She would see me, not the victim, not the footnote, the owner. I took a sip of my cocoa. It was rich and sweet. "Let them see," I whispered to the glass. The split screen of my life was about to shatter. Up here, on the balcony, everything was warm and golden. But down below, the fuse had been lit. The doorbell hadn't rung yet, but the signal was already traveling through the fiber optic cables, carrying the truth back home faster than any apology could travel. I turned back to the room. "Who wants apple cider donuts?" I called out. A cheer went up. I smiled. I was ready. I had built a fortress. And tonight, the drawbridge was up. Let the siege begin. The sun on New Year's Day hit the floor of the penthouse with a clarity that felt surgical. It cut through the glass walls, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air and the scattered remnants of the night before. There were a few pieces of silver confetti caught in the rug, sparkling like fallen stars. A half-empty bottle of champagne sat on the coffee table, the bubbles long since gone flat. I stood in the center of the living room, wearing an oversized gray hoodie that swallowed my hands. I held a mug of black coffee, the ceramic warm against my palms. For the first time in my life, the silence in my home did not feel like loneliness. It felt like peace. It felt like the deep, satisfied exhale after a long race. My phone was sitting on the marble island, buzzing against the stone every few minutes. It was not the family group chat this time. It was the new network I had built. Maya sent a text. "The boys are still talking about the ant cars. Thank you. Kiara. Best New Year in 10 years. Seriously." Aunt Lila sent a photo of herself at the airport, wearing large sunglasses. "Next year. I am bringing my own vodka. Yours was too smooth. Love you. Darling." Jonah sent a voice memo that was just him strumming a happy chord on his guitar and laughing. I took a sip of coffee, letting the bitterness wake up my senses. I felt triumphant. I had done it. I had staged a coup against the family narrative, and I had won. Then, at 10 in the morning, the buzzing changed rhythm. It became long, insistent, and angry. I looked at the screen. Uncle Mark. My stomach dropped. The old reflex kicked in. The urge to apologize, to hide, to make myself small. But then I looked at the silver confetti on the rug. I looked at the hook by the door where my keys hung. I was not in Ohio. I was in my castle. I picked up the phone. I did not put it to my ear. I tapped the speaker button and set it down on the counter, leaning back against the edge, crossing my arms over my chest. "Happy New Year. Uncle Mark," I said. My voice was steady, though my heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "You have got some nerve, Kiara." His voice filled the kitchen, loud and distorted by the speaker. It sounded like he was pacing. I could hear the heavy intake of his breath. "Excuse me?" I asked. "Do not play dumb with me," he snapped. "The video, the one Ethan posted. Do you have any idea what you have done? People are talking. Kiara, people in town. They are asking Vanessa how her stepdaughter can afford a penthouse in Chicago when she told everyone you were struggling. They are asking why you were hosting a party while your father sat at home." I took another sip of coffee. I did not know I was responsible for Vanessa's public relations strategy. I said coolly, "You made her look like a fool," Mark shouted. "She is humiliated. She spent all morning crying. She says you did this on purpose to make the family look divided. You invite the outcasts. You show off your money. And you leave your own father out in the cold? You are vindictive, Kiara. That is what you are." I looked at the ceiling. The accusation was so rich it was almost funny. "I did not leave Dad out," I said. "He sent me a text telling me not to come, remember? Simple New Year. That was his choice." "He was trying to protect the peace," Mark yelled. "And you blew it up. You just had to show off. You just had to make it about you. Vanessa is right. You love the drama." The word drama triggered something in me. It was the same word they used when I asked for winter boots that fit. It was the same word they used when I asked why Dylan got an allowance and I got chores. I set my mug down. The sound of ceramic hitting stone was sharp. "Let us talk about drama." "Mark," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "Let us talk about why I really wasn't invited. It wasn't because Dad wanted a simple holiday. It was because Vanessa does not want to look at my face and be reminded of what she did." There was a pause on the line, a heavy, loaded silence. "Oh, here we go." Mark groaned. He sounded bored. He sounded like a man dealing with a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Are you still harping on that?" "Harping on it?" I repeated. "She assaulted me." "She did not assault you." Mark laughed. It was a dark, ugly sound. "She got a little rough. She lost her temper. It happens. Families fight." I closed my eyes. The memory washed over me, not as a vague feeling, but as a high-definition film. I was 23 years old. It was 3 years ago, right before I sold the software. During a brief visit home to collect the last of my things, I was an adult. I was standing in the kitchen, telling Vanessa that I would not co-sign a loan for Dylan's car. I remembered the look in her eyes. It wasn't maternal frustration. It was pure, unadulterated malice. I remembered her hand grabbing my hair. I remembered being slammed into the refrigerator door. I remembered the way my head cracked against the metal handle. I remembered falling to the floor, clutching my side, and her kicking me, actually kicking me, in the hip while screaming that I was selfish. I opened my eyes. "I went to urgent care that night. Mark," I said, "I have the records." Mark scoffed. "You went to the doctor for a bruise? God, you really are a snowflake. You probably went just to build a case. That is sick. Kiara, planning to sue your own family?" "I did not plan to sue." I said, "I plan to survive." "Listen to me," Mark hissed. His voice dropped to a low, threatening growl. "If you keep telling this story, this fantasy that you are some battered victim, you are going to destroy your father. Do you hear me? He is old. He is tired. If you drag Vanessa through the mud, if you make this into a legal thing, it will kill him. Is that what you want? Do you want to be the daughter who killed her father with stress because she couldn't get over a little slap?" A little slap. He was rewriting history in real time. He was taking a felony and shrinking it down until it fit into a jewelry box. I felt a cold clarity settle over me. It was the same feeling I had when I negotiated with the executives at Silverline. I saw the board, I saw the pieces, and I knew exactly where to move. "I am not 12 anymore. Uncle Mark," I said, "you cannot scare me into silence." "I am not trying to scare you," he said. "I am trying to talk sense into you. Just apologize to Vanessa. Take down the video. Tell everyone it was a misunderstanding. And maybe, just maybe, we can move past this." I looked at the phone. The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted me to apologize to the woman who had beaten me. "No," I said. "What?" "No," I repeated. "I am done apologizing. And I am done letting you decide what hurts. You say I'm overreacting? You say it was just a little rough?" "Yes," he shouted, "because it was." "Fine," I said, "then prove it." "Prove what?" "If you are so sure that I am the liar and that Vanessa is the victim, then come here." "Come where?" "To Chicago, to my penthouse. I'm inviting you. I want you, Dad, and Vanessa to come here for dinner, 3 days from now. Wednesday night at 7. Mark laughed. An incredulous bark. You think we are going to drive 4 hours to have dinner with you after this stunt? If you do not come, I continued, cutting him off, then I will assume you are afraid of the truth. If I am just a drama queen, come look me in the eye and tell me that in person. Come stand in my house, look at the evidence I have, and tell me to my face that I'm making it up. I let the silence hang there. I knew their pride. I knew Vanessa's vanity. They would not be able to resist the challenge. They would want to see the penthouse. They would want to come and inspect my life so they could find the cracks in it. Mark breathed heavily. Fine, we will be there, and you better have a hell of an apology ready, Kiara, because we are done indulging your fantasies. He hung up. The line went dead. I stood in the quiet kitchen, my hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I finished my coffee. I walked over to my laptop and opened it. I navigated to the encrypted folder. System logs. I opened the subfolder labeled Incident 2021. There they were. The photos. The purple and black contusion on my hip that looked like a storm cloud. The split lip. The medical report from the urgent care center in Toledo. Dated and time-stamped. Listing the diagnosis. Contusion. Ribcage. Laceration. Oral mucosa. Patient reports domestic altercation. I had screenshotted the texts Vanessa sent me the next day. I hope you are happy now that you made your father cry. You provoke me until I snap, and then play the innocent. Grow up. She had admitted it. You provoke me until I snap. She hadn't denied hitting me. She had just blamed me for her fist. I selected all the files. I opened my email client. I typed in 2 addresses. The first was Detective Elena Alvarez, Chicago Police Department, Domestic Violence Unit. I had met Alvarez 6 months ago at a charity gala for the scholarship fund I started. We had talked. I had told her, hypothetically, about a friend who had evidence of past abuse but was afraid to use it. She had looked at me with sharp, knowing eyes and given me her card. When your friend is ready, she had said, tell her to email me. The statute of limitations hasn't run out. The second email address was Naomi Fields, Senior Partner, Brightline Legal Group. Naomi was the shark who had handled my contract with Silverline. She cost $800 an hour, and she terrified grown men. I had kept her on retainer for exactly this moment. Subject: evidence regarding Kiara Schwartz versus Vanessa Pierce. I attached the files. I attached the photos. I attached the medical records. I attached the screenshots of Mark's threats to destroy me if I spoke up. I typed a short message to Detective Alvarez and Naomi. I am hosting a dinner on Wednesday night. The perpetrators will be present. I am not asking for an arrest yet. I am asking for a witness. I am asking for the legal framework to ensure that when they leave, they never come back. I hit send. The progress bar moved across the screen. Sending. Sent. I closed the laptop. I walked over to the window and looked down at the city. The cars were still moving. The world was still turning. But the axis of my life had shifted. I picked up my phone again and dialed Naomi's number. It was Sunday, but she picked up on the second ring. I got your email. Kiara, she said. Her voice was crisp, professional, and lethal. Do you want to file for a restraining order immediately? Not yet, I said. I invited them to dinner. Naomi paused. You invited them to dinner? That is unconventional. I need them to say it. Naomi, I need them to say that I am lying while the police are listening. I need to pop the bubble. I understand. Naomi said, I will draft the paperwork, and I will call Detective Alvarez. We will coordinate. One question, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. Yes? If we need to proceed, if things go sideways, who knocks on my door? Naomi's voice softened. Just a fraction. We do. Kiara, we knock, and when we walk in, we bring the law with us. I hung up. I walked to the foyer and looked at the front door of my penthouse. It was a heavy, solid door made of dark wood. In 3 days, that doorbell would ring. It would ring twice. Once for the lies, and once for the truth. I turned away and went to clean up the confetti. I had a dinner party to plan, and this time, the menu was going to be very, very cold. 3 days later, the silence in my penthouse was heavy enough to crush a lung. The warmth of the New Year's Eve party had evaporated, leaving the room cold and sterile. The long farmhouse table where Aunt Lila had danced and Maya's kids had spilled hot cocoa was gone, replaced by the original, severe glass dining table I had bought when I first moved in. I had set 4 places, 4 square plates, 4 crystal glasses, 4 sets of heavy silver cutlery that looked more like surgical instruments than tools for eating. I stood by the kitchen island, gripping the edge of the countertop until my knuckles turned white. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs, a war drum signaling the approach of the enemy. 7 o'clock. The elevator mechanism hummed in the wall. It was a low vibration, barely audible, but to me, it sounded like a freight train. I straightened my spine. I smoothed down the front of my black dress. I was not wearing a hoodie today. I was wearing a tailored sheath dress that cost $2,000, and my hair was pulled back in a severe, tight bun. I was not the daughter. I was the CEO. The elevator doors slid open. My father, Robert, stepped out first. He looked smaller than I remembered. The vastness of the room seemed to shrink him immediately. He held his hat in his hands, turning it round and round by the brim. Behind him came Vanessa. She was wearing a camel hair coat that I knew she couldn't really afford, and her hair was sprayed into a helmet of perfection. She did not look at the room with wonder. She looked at it with a sneer, her eyes scanning the floor-to-ceiling windows not for the view, but for the flaws. Uncle Mark brought up the rear. He was carrying a bottle of red wine, gripping the neck so hard I thought the glass might snap. He looked around with a mix of hunger and resentment, his eyes lingering on the expensive art on the walls. "Hello, Dad," I said. My voice was calm. It did not shake. "Kiara," Dad said. He stepped forward, looking like he wanted to hug me, then stopped when he saw the lack of welcome in my eyes. "This place it is something." Vanessa walked past him. She didn't say hello. She walked straight to the window, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. She looked down at the city, then turned back to me with a thin, icy smile. "You have erected quite a stage here, Kiara," she said. I stared at her. "A stage?" "For your performance," she clarified, unbuttoning her coat and tossing it onto one of the minimalist armchairs without asking. "The party, the video, this apartment, it is all very theatrical. You always did know how to construct a scene to make yourself look like the heroine." I did not take the bait. I gestured to the table. "Dinner is ready. Please, sit." We moved to the table. The scraping of the chairs against the floor was loud in the empty room. I had ordered food from a high-end steakhouse, fillets, truffle mashed potatoes, asparagus, but no one looked hungry. Uncle Mark poured the wine. He filled his glass to the brim, then poured for Vanessa and Dad. He did not offer to pour mine. "So," Mark said, taking a large gulp of wine, "we drove 4 hours. We are here. Are you happy? Or do you have another surprise video you want to film for your little internet friends?" I picked up my napkin and unfolded it, placing it on my lap. "I invited you here because we need to finish a conversation." I said, "The conversation we started on the phone 3 days ago, the one where you told me I was overreacting." Dad sighed, cutting into his steak with weary resignation. "Kiara, please, can we not do this? Can we just have a nice meal? We haven't seen you in months." "We are not here to eat." "Dad," I said. I reached under the table and pulled out a black leather portfolio. I placed it on the glass surface. The sound was a dull thud. Vanessa eyed the folder. "What is that? More drama?" "It is the truth," I said. I opened the portfolio. I took out the first photograph. It was an 8x10 glossy print. It showed my torso, specifically my left hip and rib cage, covered in a blooming purple-black bruise the size of a dinner plate. I slid it across the glass table toward Dad. He looked down. He flinched, his fork clattering against his plate. I took out the second photo. It was a close-up of the side of my face, showing the split lip and the cut behind my ear where Vanessa's diamond ring had torn the skin. I slid that one toward Mark. Then I took out the medical report. I read from it, my voice devoid of emotion. Patient presents with blunt force trauma to the midsection and cranial contusions. I read. Patient states she was thrown against a counter and struck repeatedly. Date: December 28th, 2018. I placed the paper in the center of the table. This is what you call overreacting, I said, looking at Mark. This is what you call a little rough. The silence that followed was suffocating. The only sound was the wind howling faintly against the glass 45 stories up. Vanessa picked up her wine glass. Her hand was trembling, just slightly, but she steadied it. She took a sip, leaving a rim of red lipstick on the crystal. "You are pathetic," she said softly. "Excuse me?" I asked. "You held on to this?" She gestured vaguely at the photos. "For years? You kept a file? That is sick, Kiara. That is obsessive. Who does that?" "Someone who knows you," I replied. She laughed, a brittle, sharp sound. "You take everything out of context. That night, I was under so much pressure. Your father's business was failing. Dylan was struggling. And you stood there in my kitchen, looking down your nose at us with that arrogant, superior attitude of yours. You provoked me." "I provoked you into beating me?" "I pushed you," Vanessa snapped. "And maybe I slapped you. Once, because you were hysterical. You were screaming at me. I was trying to calm you down." I pulled out another piece of paper. It was a printout of a text message thread. Date: December 29th, 2018. Sender: Vanessa, I am sorry I lost control. You know how you get under my skin. If you hadn't been so disrespectful, I wouldn't have had to discipline you. Discipline. I repeated the word. I was 20 years old. Vanessa, I was not a child. You do not discipline another adult. That is called assault. Mark slammed his wine glass down. Wine sloshed over the rim, staining the white tablecloth I had rented. "Enough," he roared. He pointed a thick finger at me. "You are enjoying this, aren't you? You think because you have some money now, because you have this fancy apartment, that you can sit there and judge us? I am judging you based on your actions." "Mark," I said. "You are blowing it out of proportion," he shouted. "Look at you." He gestured at me. "Up and down. You are fine. You are healthy. You are rich. Did that night stop you from succeeding?" "No. So what is the damage?" "Really? You got a few bruises. They healed. You are acting like she tried to murder you." "So the standard is murder?" I asked. "Unless I am dead, I am not allowed to complain?" "The standard is reality," Mark retorted. "Families fight. Sometimes it gets physical. My dad used to belt me when I talked back. I didn't go running to the police. I didn't start a file. I took it like a man. You are just soft. You want to be a victim because it makes you feel special." I looked at Dad. He was staring at the photo of my bruised ribs. He hadn't touched his food. "Dad?" I said. He looked up. His eyes were wet, but they were also evasive. He wouldn't hold my gaze. "Kiara, honey," he murmured. "It was a long time ago. Why bring it up now? Vanessa has apologized. She said she was sorry." "She blamed me." "Dad, that is not an apology." "She is trying her best," Dad said, his voice pleading. "We all are. Being a stepmother is hard. You were difficult to connect with. You were always so withdrawn." I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. Even with the photos right in front of him, even with the medical report screaming the truth, he was still choosing the path of least resistance. He was choosing his comfort over my safety. "I understand," I said. I gathered the photos. I stacked them neatly. I put them back in the portfolio. "You understand what?" Vanessa asked, her eyes narrowing. "That you are being ridiculous?" "I understand that you are incapable of change." I said, "I understand that in this family, the truth is whatever makes you feel comfortable. And I understand that I can no longer allow you to write my story." I stood up. I walked to the head of the table, where no one was sitting. I placed my hands on the back of the empty chair. This dinner is over, I said. Oh, sit down, Mark scoffed. We haven't even finished the wine. Get out, I said. Vanessa let out a huff of disbelief. You cannot be serious. You invite us all the way here just to kick us out? This is exactly what I mean about the drama. You are unstable, Kiara. I am not unstable, I said, my voice rising for the first time. I am done. I am done being the punching bag. I am done being the scapegoat. I am done being told that my pain is an inconvenience to you. I looked at Dad. I wanted you to come here, Dad, because I wanted to give you one last chance. I wanted to see if you would look at the evidence and finally protect me. Just once. Dad looked down at his hands. I do not want to choose sides. Kiara. You already chose, I said softly. You chose her. You chose her every time she insulted me. You chose her when she spent your retirement money on Dylan. And you chose her when she beat me in your own kitchen. I turned to Mark. And you? I said, you told me I was overreacting. You told me to stop telling the story. I did, Mark said, leaning back in his chair, his face flushed with wine and arrogance, and I meant it, because nobody cares. Kiara, nobody cares about a little family spat from years ago. You think you are terrifying? You are just a little girl playing pretend in a high tower. I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. I am not playing, Mark. He laughed again, a cruel, dismissive sound. Then what are you going to do? Huh? You going to sue us? You going to cry to your blog? Or are you going to call the police and ask them to arrest your family over a slap? Go ahead. I would love to see them laugh in your face. He grinned, revealing teeth stained purple with wine. Call them, he taunted. Let us see who they believe. The grieving parents or the hysterical, estranged daughter? He picked up his knife and fork, cutting a piece of steak with aggressive motions. You haven't got the guts, he muttered. The room went silent again. Mark chewed his steak, staring at me with triumph. Vanessa smirked, adjusting her collar. Dad stared at the tablecloth. I stood perfectly still. Then it happened. Ding dong. The sound was sharp. It was crystalline. It cut through the heavy atmosphere of the penthouse like a guillotine blade dropping. Mark stopped chewing. Vanessa's smirk faltered. Dad's head snapped up toward the foyer. The doorbell rang again. Long, insistent, authoritative. Ding dong. I did not move to answer it immediately. I looked at Mark. The arrogance was draining from his face, replaced by a flicker of confusion. Who is that? Vanessa whispered. Her voice was suddenly very small. I didn't answer her. I walked past the table. My heels made no sound on the rug, but they clicked with a rhythm of finality on the hardwood floor of the hallway. I reached the heavy wooden door. I paused for a fraction of a second, my hand hovering over the handle. I took a breath. It was the last breath of the girl who used to hide in the garage. I turned the lock. Click. I pulled the door open. I walked to the door with a cadence that was deliberate and slow. Every click of my heel on the hardwood floor was a metronome counting down the remaining seconds of their delusion. Behind me, the silence of the dining room had fractured into frantic, hushed whispers. Do not tell me she actually called them, Vanessa hissed, the sound of her chair scraping violently against the floor echoing in the cavernous space. She is bluffing, Mark muttered, though his voice lacked the booming confidence it had held 30 seconds ago. She is just trying to scare us. She wouldn't dare. I reached the door. The brass handle was cool under my palm. I did not look back at them. I did not need to see their faces to know that the air had been sucked out of their lungs. I turned the lock. The bolt slid back with a heavy mechanical thud that sounded final. I pulled the door open. 2 people stood in the hallway under the soft, recessed lighting of the penthouse foyer. They were not uniformed patrol officers responding to a noise complaint. They were not there to tell us to keep it down. On the left stood Detective Elena Alvarez. She wore a dark navy blazer over a crisp white shirt, a gold badge clipped to her belt, and an expression of professional detachment that was more terrifying than any anger. I had spoken to her on the phone, But seeing her here, in the flesh, with her hand resting casually near her waist, was a different reality. On the right stood Naomi Fields, my attorney from Brightline Legal Group. Naomi was holding a thick leather briefcase. She looked like she could dismantle a corporation with a single email, which, to be fair, she had done before. "Ms. Schwartz," Alvarez said. She nodded at me, a gesture of recognition and respect. "Detective," I said. "Thank you for coming." I stepped aside, opening the path into my home. Alvarez and Naomi walked in. Their footsteps were heavy, authoritative. They walked past me and into the open-plan dining area. Vanessa was standing by the window, her hand clutching her throat. Mark was still sitting, but he had pushed his chair back, his face a mask of aggressive confusion. Dad was staring at the empty doorway, his face pale. Alvarez stopped at the head of the table. She looked at the uneaten steaks. She looked at the bottle of wine. Then she looked at Vanessa. "Good evening," Alvarez said. Her voice was calm, modulated, the voice of someone who has controlled rooms far more volatile than this one. "I am Detective Alvarez with the Domestic Violence Unit of the Chicago Police Department. This is Ms. Fields, legal counsel for Ms. Schwartz." "Domestic Violence Unit?" Vanessa choked out the words. Her eyes darted to Dad, then to Mark, then back to Alvarez. "This is ridiculous. This is a private family dinner. You have no right to be here." "Actually, Mrs. Pierce, we do," Alvarez said. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small notepad. "Ms. Schwartz filed an initial report with my office 4 months ago regarding a series of incidents involving physical assault and ongoing harassment. She recently submitted supplementary evidence, including medical records and digital correspondence. We are here to conduct a follow-up interview with the complainant and to inform the named parties that an investigation is active." Mark stood up. His chair toppled over backward, hitting the floor with a loud crash. "This is a setup," he shouted, his face turning a blotchy red. "She lured us here. She invited us to dinner. You cannot ambush people like this. It is entrapment." Naomi Fields stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "It is not entrapment to invite family members to dinner." "Mr. Pierce?" Naomi said. "And it is certainly not entrapment to have legal and law enforcement representation present when you have a history of dismissing and threatening a victim of violence." "Victim?" Vanessa practically shrieked the word. "She isn't a victim. She is a liar. She is a manipulative little brat who is trying to ruin my reputation." Alvarez did not blink. She looked at Vanessa with a gaze that dissected her frantic energy and found it wanting. "Ma'am, I am going to ask you to lower your voice," Alvarez said. "We are not here to debate your opinion of your stepdaughter. We are here to deal with facts, and the facts we have on file describe a physical altercation on December 28, 2018, resulting in documented soft tissue damage to the victim." "That was years ago," Mark yelled. He walked around the table, pointing a finger at Alvarez. "You are going to arrest someone for a slap that happened 3 years ago? This is a joke. This is a waste of taxpayer money. There is no statute of limitations on the truth." "Mr. Pierce?" Naomi said, opening her briefcase. She pulled out a stack of documents, stapled and organized with blue legal tabs. Naomi placed the documents on the glass table, right next to the wine bottle Mark had been drinking from. "This," Naomi said, tapping the paper, "is a draft for a civil protection order. We are prepared to file this with the Cook County Circuit Court tomorrow morning. It details the assault. It details the gaslighting. It details the phone call you made to my client 3 days ago, Mr. Pierce, where you minimized her injuries and threatened that she would destroy her father if she spoke up." Mark froze, his mouth opened, but no sound came out. You recorded that?" he whispered, looking at me with pure venom. I did not answer him. I stood by the kitchen island, watching. I was done speaking. It was their turn to listen. "That is illegal," Vanessa spat. "You cannot record people without their consent." "Illinois is a 2-party consent state for private conversations," Naomi acknowledged smoothly. However, there is an exception when a person has a reasonable suspicion that a crime is being committed, or they are gathering evidence of imminent threats to their safety. Given the history of violence, Ms. Schwartz was well within her rights to document your threats. Vanessa looked at Dad. Robert, do something! Look at what your daughter is doing. She is treating us like criminals. Dad looked up. He looked old. He looked tired. He looked at Alvarez, then at the badge clipped to her belt. Is this real? Dad asked, his voice barely a whisper. Are you really investigating this? Yes, sir, Alvarez said. She turned her attention to the photos I had left on the table, the ones of my bruised ribs. She picked one up. Mr. Pierce, Alvarez said to my father, I see bruises like this every day. Usually. The people who make them say the same things your wife and brother are saying right now. They say the victim is overreacting. They say she bruised easily. They say she provoked it. Alvarez placed the photo back down. But the law does not care about provocation in verbal arguments. Sir, verbal disrespect does not justify physical battery. When an adult strikes another adult, causing bodily harm, that is a crime. It is not drama. It is not a family spat. It is battery. Vanessa scoffed, crossing her arms. It wasn't battery. I barely touched her. She's making it sound like I beat her with a club. I pushed her. She fell. Alvarez pulled a piece of paper from her pocket. It was a printout. Let me read something to you. Mrs. Pierce, Alvarez said. She adjusted her glasses. This is a text message sent from your number to Kiara Schwartz on December 29th, 2018. Quote, I am sorry I lost control. You know how you get under my skin. If you hadn't been so disrespectful, I wouldn't have had to discipline you. End quote. Alvarez looked up over the rim of her glasses. You admitted to losing control, Alvarez said. You admitted to disciplining a 20-year-old woman. That admission, combined with the medical report from the urgent care clinic dated the same night, constitutes a very strong evidentiary foundation. You confessed, ma'am. You just didn't realize it at the time because you thought you were above the consequences. Vanessa's face went slack. The narrative she had built, the story where I was the crazy one and she was the saint, was dissolving in the acid bath of police procedure. But, she stammered, that was taken out of context. There is no context where hitting someone is legal. Mrs. Pierce, Alvarez said sharply. Mark tried one last, desperate pivot. He puffed out his chest, trying to use his physical size to intimidate the room. This is bull, he growled. You are not going to prosecute this. It is a he said, she said situation. No prosecutor is going to touch a 3-year-old case with no witnesses. You are just here to scare us because Kiara paid you off. Alvarez took a step toward Mark. She was half his size, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees around her. I am a detective of the Chicago Police Department, she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I am not on anyone's payroll. And as for witnesses, we have the victim's testimony, we have the medical records, we have the defendant's text messages, and now, thanks to your little outburst on the phone, we have evidence of witness intimidation. Naomi stepped in, sliding a piece of paper toward Vanessa. This is a cease and desist letter, Naomi said. It is effective immediately. It states that any further contact with Ms. Schwartz, via phone, email, social media, or third parties, will be considered harassment. If you show up at this building again, security has been instructed to call the police. If you attempt to contact her employer or her business associates to disparage her, we will file a civil suit for defamation and tortious interference. Vanessa stared at the paper. Her hands were shaking. She looked at the legal letterhead, at the sharp black font that spelled out her name as a potential defendant. Robert, she whimpered, turning to my father again, say something. Tell them to leave. This is your house. Well, it is your daughter's house. Tell her to stop. Dad stood up slowly. He looked at the photos on the table. He looked at the printout of the text message. He looked at the medical report that used the words blunt force trauma. He looked at me. Kiara, he said, His voice cracked. I walked over to the table. I stood next to Naomi. I looked at the three people who had defined my world for so long. I didn't want to do this, Dad. I said, I really didn't. I kept those files for years and never used them. I told myself that maybe, one day, you would just say sorry. I told myself that if I became successful enough, if I became perfect enough, you would stop rewriting history. I looked at Mark. But then Uncle Mark called me. I said, he told me I was overreacting. He told me to shut up and take it. He told me that my pain was a lie. I took a deep breath. That was the moment, I said. That was when I realized you were never going to stop. You were going to gaslight me until the day I died. You were going to make me carry the shame for Vanessa's violence forever. I leaned forward, placing my hands on the table. So, no, I am not overreacting. I am reacting exactly as much as the law allows. Vanessa looked at the papers in her hands. She looked at Alvarez, who was watching her with the impassive gaze of a predator waiting for movement. She looked at Naomi, who was checking her watch as if she had a more important merger to dismantle later. Vanessa realized then that she could not cry her way out of this. She could not charm her way out. She could not bully her way out. The drama she accused me of creating had materialized into a legal cage, and she had walked right into it. Mark slumped back against the wall. He looked deflated. He realized that his phone call, the one where he thought he was being the big, tough patriarch putting the little girl in her place, was the domino that had knocked all of this down. Naomi closed her briefcase with a sharp snap. We are done here for tonight, Naomi said. The protection order will be filed tomorrow. Detective Alvarez will be in touch regarding the criminal investigation. I suggest you retain counsel immediately. Do not use your family lawyer. You are going to need a criminal defense attorney. Alvarez nodded to me. Ms. Schwartz, we will be in touch. Wait, Dad said. He reached out a hand toward me. Kiara. Does this mean, are you arresting Vanessa, right now? Not tonight, sir, Alvarez said. Unless she refuses to leave the premises peacefully. The investigation is ongoing, but charges are pending review by the state's attorney. Dad looked at Vanessa. For the first time, I saw him look at her not as his wife, not as his savior, but as a liability. He saw the police in the room. He saw the lawyers. He saw the ruin she had brought to his doorstep because she couldn't control her temper. I think you should go, I said to them. Vanessa dropped the papers on the table. She grabbed her coat. She didn't put it on. She just clutched it to her chest like armor. She walked to the elevator without looking at me. She pressed the button repeatedly, her fingers stabbing at the metal. Mark followed her, keeping his head down, refusing to make eye contact with Alvarez. Dad lingered. He looked at me, then at the photo of my bruised ribs one last time. I didn't know it was that bad, he whispered. Yes, you did. Dad, I said, you just chose to forget. The elevator doors opened. Vanessa and Mark stepped in. Dad followed them slowly. He turned to look at me as the doors began to slide shut. I stood there, flanked by my detective and my lawyer. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just watched the gap between us close. The doors shut. The hum of the elevator signaled their descent. The room was quiet again, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of before. It was the clean, sharp silence of a surgical theater after the tumor has been cut out. Naomi let out a breath and smoothed her skirt. Well, she said, that went exactly as expected. Alvarez tucked her notepad back into her pocket. She looked at me and gave me a small, genuine smile. You did good. Kiara, she said, it is hard to stand up to them, but you did it. I looked at the table where the photos still lay scattered. The narrative was broken. The story they had told for 10 years, that I was the problem, that I was the drama queen, had been shredded by the cold, hard teeth of the legal system. They know now, I said softly. Alvarez nodded. They know, and more importantly, they know that we know. I walked to the window and looked down. I imagined them walking out of the lobby, stepping into the cold Chicago night. I imagined the silence in their car on the long drive back to Ohio. It wouldn't be a silence of peace. It would be a silence of terror. I turned back to Naomi and Alvarez. "Can I offer you both a glass of wine?" I asked. "It is a really good vintage, and I have 3 open bottles that are going to go to waste." Naomi smiled, a rare, sharp expression. "I could stay for one. I am billing you for the hour anyway." Alvarez checked her watch. "I am off duty in 10 minutes. Why not?" I walked to the kitchen to get fresh glasses. The bell had rung. The truth had walked in. And for the first time in my life, when the door closed, I wasn't the one trapped inside. I was the one holding the key. The elevator doors hummed shut, sealing Vanessa and Uncle Mark inside a steel box of their own humiliation. But as the mechanism locked, I realized the room wasn't entirely empty of family. My father, Robert, had not stepped onto the elevator. He stood near the foyer wall, his hat clutched in both hands, looking like a man who had just watched his house burn down and realized he was holding the matches. He was staring at the space where his wife and brother had just vanished, his face pale and slack. I turned my back on him for a moment. I needed to breathe. I walked over to the dining table where Detective Alvarez and Naomi were sitting. They looked calm, professional, like surgeons who had just successfully excised a tumor and were now removing their gloves. "So," Naomi said, opening her laptop to make a note, "that is done. The cease and desist is served. The protection order goes in tomorrow morning." I placed my hands on the back of a chair to steady myself. My adrenaline was crashing, leaving me feeling hollow and lightheaded. "I do not want them arrested tonight," I said, my voice quiet but firm. I looked at Alvarez. "I want the file open. I want the investigation active. But I do not want squad cars at their house in Ohio tonight. Not yet." Alvarez nodded slowly. She understood. It wasn't about mercy. It was about control. "We will keep the file open. Ms. Schwartz," Alvarez said. She tapped the folder containing my medical records. "The evidence is preserved. The statute of limitations is on our side for a while longer. But here's the most important thing." She leaned forward, her dark eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my chest tight. "We know who they are now," she said. "If a tire gets slashed, if a nasty email gets sent, if someone tries to intimidate you at your office, we know exactly where to look. And more importantly, Kiara, we believe you. We believe you." 3 words. They weighed more than the $28 million in my bank account. They weighed more than any apology Vanessa could have offered. For 10 years, I had been screaming into a void, told that my reality was a distortion, that my pain was a performance, and now, a stranger with a badge had looked at the facts and validated my existence. "Thank you," I whispered. I heard a shuffle of footsteps behind me. I turned around. Dad was walking slowly toward the table. He stopped a few feet away, looking at the scattered photos of my bruises like they were radioactive. He looked at Naomi. He looked at Alvarez. Then, finally, he looked at me. "I told them to go," he said. His voice was rough, like gravel grinding together. "Vanessa wanted me to. She wanted me to fix it. She wanted me to tell you to stop. She was crying about being embarrassed, about losing face." "And?" I asked, my arms crossed over my chest. Dad shook his head. I looked at the picture. "Kiara, the one of your ribs." He pointed a trembling finger at the glossy photo on the table. "I never looked at it before," he admitted. "When you tried to show me that night, I looked away. I did not want to see it. Because if I saw it, I would have had to do something. I would have had to admit that I married a woman who could hurt my child." He took a breath, and it sounded like a sob caught in his throat. "So I looked away," he whispered, "and I told you to stop making a fuss. I chose a fake peace because I was too much of a coward to fight for a real one." The room was silent. The wind outside battered the glass. But inside, the air was still. This was the moment. This was the apology I had fantasized about when I was 16, hiding in the garage. This was the vindication I had wanted when I was 20, icing my face in the dorm room. But now that it was here, it didn't feel like a victory parade. It felt like a tragedy. It felt like mourning the years we had lost to his cowardice. I cannot fix the past, Dad, I said, and I cannot give you a pass just because you finally decided to open your eyes today. I know, he said. He looked down at his hat. I know. He looked up again, and for the first time in years, I saw a flicker of the father he used to be before Vanessa, the father who used to let me hold the flashlight while he fixed the sink. I sent them home, he said. I told Mark to drive Vanessa back to Ohio. I told them I was not going with them tonight. I told them I needed to speak to my daughter without their voices in my ear. He paused. I do not know if you want me here, Kiara, and I will leave if you tell me to, but I wanted you to know that for the first time in 10 years, I am not leaving the room when things get hard. I looked at him. He was an old man. He was flawed. He was weak, but he was standing there, without his wife, without his brother, facing the wreckage he had helped create. I gestured to the chair opposite me. Sit down, Dad, I said. He sat. He didn't reach for my hand. He didn't try to hug me. He just sat there, respecting the distance I had built. Naomi and Alvarez exchanged a look. They sensed that their part in this play was over. They stood up, gathering their files and briefcases. We will show ourselves out, Naomi said softly. Call me tomorrow. Kiara. Alvarez stopped by my chair and squeezed my shoulder. Good night, Miss Schwartz. Lock the door behind us. I watched them leave. The heavy door clicked shut, leaving me alone with my father in the vast, expensive silence of the penthouse. We sat there for a long time. I poured him a glass of water. He drank it with shaking hands. So, he said, looking around the room properly for the first time, you built all this by yourself. I did, I said. It is incredible, he said. He sounded sad, and I missed it. I missed watching you become this person because I was too busy placating Vanessa. You did miss it, I agreed, and you cannot get that time back. I know, he said. He looked at me, his eyes searching my face for a sign of the little girl I used to be. Is there a way back? He asked. If I leave her? If I change? Can we be a family again? I looked at him. I thought about the easy answer, the Hollywood answer where we hug and cry and everything is forgiven, but I was not a character in a movie. I was a woman who had scars on her ribs and scars on her heart. Trust is not a switch. Dad, I said, you cannot just flip it back on. You watched me drown for 10 years and did nothing. It is going to take a long time to prove to me that you are not going to push me back under the water the next time Vanessa gets upset. I will prove it, he said. He leaned forward. I promise you. Kiara, I will prove it. He hesitated, then asked a question that hung in the air like smoke. Next year, he said, New Year's Eve, if I do the work, if I show you I have changed, can I come here? Can I stand on this balcony with you and watch the fireworks? I looked toward the balcony. The glass was dark now, reflecting the two of us sitting at the long, empty table. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the city, at the millions of lights representing millions of lives. I turned back to him. My balcony has a rule. Dad, I said. What is it? He asked. It is only open to people who believe me. I said, it is only open to people who do not call my pain overreacting. If you can be one of those people, truly, consistently, without excuse, then yes, you can come. But if you ever, even once, try to tell me that her violence was my fault, the door stays locked, forever. He nodded. He swallowed hard. That is fair, he said. That is more than fair. He stood up. He put his hat on. I should go, he said. I need to find a hotel. I am not going back to Ohio tonight. I have a lot of thinking to do. I did not offer to pay for his hotel. I did not offer him the guest room. That was a boundary. He needed to sit in his own discomfort for a while. Good night, Dad, I said. Good night, Kiara, he said. He walked to the door. He paused, his hand on the latch. I am proud of you. I know I lost the right to say that, but I am. He opened the door and walked out. I waited until I heard the elevator hum, signaling his departure. Then, and only then, Did I let out the breath I had been holding for 3 days? My knees shook, and I sank down onto the floor, pulling my knees to my chest. I didn't cry. I just sat there, feeling the immense weight of the truth settling around me. It was done. The boil was lanced. The narrative was shattered. After a few minutes, I stood up. The apartment was quiet. The ghosts of the dinner party, the anger, the denial, the fear were fading, sucked out by the high-tech ventilation system. I walked to the foyer. I looked at the brass hook by the door. My keys were dangling there, catching the light. I reached out and took them down. The metal was cool and heavy in my hand. I walked through the living room, past the empty table, past the photos of my bruises that I would now burn because I no longer needed them as proof. Everyone knew. I slid open the heavy glass door to the balcony. The wind hit me instantly, cold and biting, smelling of snow and lake water. I stepped out. The city roared below me, a symphony of sirens, horns, and wind. It was chaotic and beautiful and real. I walked to the railing. I looked down 45 stories. I thought about the girl who used to sit in a freezing garage, fixing broken radios to drown out the sound of her stepmother's criticism. I thought about the girl who took photos of her own face in a dorm room because she knew no one would believe her. I held the keys up, letting them jingle against the wind. "This is mine," I whispered. I turned back to the door. I saw the hook I had installed on the exterior wall, right next to the glass. I hung the keys there. It was a symbol. I wasn't locking myself in anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was choosing who got to come in. I walked back inside and slid the door shut, cutting off the noise of the city. I went to the easel that was still standing in the corner from the New Year's Eve party. The intentions were still pinned there. I intend to say no. I intend to be happy. I picked up a blank index card and a marker. I wrote one final intention. My hand was steady. The ink was black and permanent. I only build balconies for those who believe me. I pinned it to the center of the board. Then, I turned around. I looked straight ahead, past the furniture, past the view, past the walls of my fortress. I looked at the imaginary audience that had been watching this story unfold, the silent witnesses to my reclamation. If your family tells you that your pain is just a performance, I ask them, my voice echoing in the quiet room, if they tell you that your bruises are an overreaction and your truth is a drama, what will you do? Will you quietly pack your bags and leave, accepting the role of the villain in their story? Or will you do what I did? Will you build your own house, install your own doorbell, and wait for the day you can open it and let the truth walk in? Because I promise you, the view from the balcony you build yourself is better than any seat at a table where you are not respected. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I know it was a heavy one, but I hope it reminded you that your truth is worth fighting for. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop a comment below and let us share our thoughts and support each other. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and please hit that hype button so this story can be heard by more people who might need to hear it. Stay strong and keep building your balconies.